Hopefully it's all working. Okay, I think we are ready to go. All
Okay.
right, all right, Mr. Bob Nease. Who are you and what do you know for sure? Go ahead.
I missed
Oh,
your
you missed.
question.
Okay, it was the who are you and what do you know for
Oh,
sure? So go right ahead.
sure. Hi, I'm Bob Nease. I'm the author of The Power of 50 Bits, a book about how to turn your best intentions into actual behavior. And what I know is that most bad behavior is not the result of bad intentions acted on, but actually the result of good intentions that are left dormant.
Good intentions that are left dormant. So let's talk a
Right.
little bit about that, right? There is something that happens, uh, my goodness, like in every area of life, isn't it? Between like business or your health or everything else, where we maybe set goals, right? And at the time of this interview, basically people have already set goals for the new year. And now we're at the end of the first quarter and some things have just not panned out the way we want them to. What is it that gets in the way of good
That,
intentions and motivate?
that's a perfect example, right? We should be really good at making New Year's resolutions because we make the same ones year after year. So it's really not an absence of good intentions that's the problem. The problem is whether we can turn those good intentions into actual behavior. And it turns out that the fundamental challenge is actually how your brain is built. So your brain, my brain, each of our brains process about 10 million bits of information a second. That's a tremendous amount of data. It's like the original Ethernet cable, sort of plugged into your head. But the conscious part of your brain, the deliberate part of your brain, the part we think of as the mind, that processes only 50 bits per second. So it's a teeny tiny portion of what the brain does. And essentially, what it seems counterintuitive, but it's really true, our brains are wired to work automatically. They're wired for inattention in today's environment, for inattention and inertia. And that's where the gap happens between what you want to do and what you actually do. The book lays out 7 strategies for activating those good intentions to deliver better behavior and better results.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you, right? So can we go back because I'm in the gifted class, right? So you're saying 10 million bits of information are processed every second, but the 50 bits is what? The only?
That's the part that our deliberate minds is allowed access to, right? So if you think about it, the brain is the result of millions of years of evolution. And modern humans, emerged probably 100,000 years ago, maybe 20,000 years ago. And the environment in which our brains were born was one that was risky, short, and calorie scarce. So it turns out that our ancestors that did the best were the ones that had these quick twitch instinctual reactions. So most of what we do is automatic. It doesn't mean that you can't learn. It doesn't mean that the brain's not plastic. If you couldn't learn, I wouldn't have written the book because it wouldn't have done any good. But really, most of what we do is automatic, and that means that if you want to deliver better behaviors for yourself, your loved ones, your customers, your coworkers, it turns out the most effective way to do that is to re-engineer the environment in which people find themselves so that their natural inclinations lead to these better behaviors. It's easier to change the environment than change somebody's mind.
Exactly. I think one of the things I've done a little bit of study and reading on brain science, and that's why your book is so interesting to me, and that's why I'm going to devote time to reading it in depth. And because one of the things that occurs to me is how automatic so much behavior is and how we go into a default for whatever reason each of our individual defaults are. And I find myself that I'm not the one driving my brain. My brain is driving me. And that can be okay when it comes to getting ready, taking a shower, eating, getting to your regular location where you need to be. But
Right?
sometimes that's not so good when you want to try something new, maybe something
Right.
that's a little bit more challenging. So let's talk a little bit about some of the strategies that you give us that will allow us to drive our own brains.
Right. So the strategies in the book fall into 2 buckets. Remember, the brain, the easiest way to remember this is that your brain is essentially wired for inattention and inertia. The strategies in the book fall into those buckets, strategies that attack the problem of inattention and and strategies that either attack or leverage the fact that we're wired for inertia. So, for example, you talked about defaults. They're really powerful. In fact, they may be the most powerful strategy that we can use. I'm going to use a work example, but you can use an example from anywhere. Many managers and employers feel like, well, my employees are just too sedentary. And the old way of solving this problem was to assume that people are rational and behave in their own self-interest. So you see somebody not engaging in the behavior, and you do a couple of things. You maybe hold some educational sessions about the importance of getting up and walking around, or you put posters in the lunchroom that says, remember to get up and walk around every 45 minutes. That would be one strategy, and frankly, the effects would be really, really modest. And the reason is most of our behaviors are automatic. The other strategy you could use is to go into conference rooms and meeting spaces and take away the chairs. Put them off someplace else, and then the default is really to stand up. It's really remarkable. Conference rooms, all these meeting spaces are actually designed so the default is to sit down, and then we wonder why people are sitting around so much. So that's an example of one of the strategies.
So set your environment up for success, and I've heard that same strategy when it comes to, let's say, if you've decided that you want to be healthier and eat healthy, the idea is to clean out the pantry and clean out the fridge and have access to these things be more difficult.
That is really the main, the overarching message in terms of the strategies is to make the right thing as easy and seamless as possible, and to make the quote wrong thing a little more effortful and a little more likely to engage your 50 bits. So taking the cookies or whatever it is you're trying to avoid out of the pantry and throwing them away, that's another strategy. It's called pre-commitment, where you make a decision today that makes a tempting but self-defeating behavior in the future a little more difficult or impossible to do.
I love that. So what are some other strategies that we could be using, and what problems are they addressing? So I guess I'm asking, what are some of the typical problems, and now you've come up with these strategies to help us address them.
Yeah, I mean, in your personal life, all you have to do is think about all those things you make New Year's resolutions for, and those are perfect examples of gaps between intention and behavior. But there are other less, obvious, more subtle behaviors. I'm going to give you an example from business. It's a charity. Have you been to PetSmart? Do you know?
Yes.
Okay. So for those of your viewers who don't know, PetSmart is a pet supply store retailer. They have a charitable organization that's attached to the company. It's called PetSmart Charities. Now, when you go to PetSmart, you buy your cat food, dog food, whatever, toys, and the cashier runs them through the checker to the scanner. You've swiped your credit card. The only thing standing between you and them turning a profit is you signing your name. And it's interesting. They stop you right before the deal is done, and they ask a simple question on the screen. It says, do you want to donate to help save homeless pets? Now, and there's buttons you can press, and there's a big red button that says no thanks that everybody behind you in line can see if you press it. What's interesting, from 2007 to 2011, a really rough time for the American economy, individual charitable contributions dropped 3%. PetSmart Charities contributions went up 85%. Now, the reason it's a tremendous success, and the insight that PetSmart Charities had was that there were a lot of people who would donate to the charity if they stopped and thought about it, but they understood that people's attention is scarce, and it's only pointed to things that are really pressing or pleasurable, and giving to charity didn't really make the cut. It was always sort of in the middle. So they used this strategy, which is called requiring choice or active choice, where you stop people and you say, I need your 50 bits for just 15 seconds. Tell me, do you want to donate or not? It doesn't say you have to donate. It doesn't even give you a pitch about donation. It just has this, homeless pets sort of frame. And what they find, certainly among their clientele, is there's a lot of latent interest for donating, which is only tapped if you stop people and grab their 50 bits. So that's another strategy, requiring choice.
I absolutely love this conversation, but I've got to ask you, what triggered you to even think about this? Tell me a story of what happened that got you to this point, to learning so much and doing so much around this area.
Well, I'll tell you the story. It's in fact, I'm sitting in Atlanta. We're visiting some friends, and it happened right here in Atlanta several years ago. So my formal training is in how people are supposed to make decisions, not how they actually make decisions, but how they're supposed to make. And it's sort of a classical economics background. And we had been doing all kinds of stuff at this healthcare company, trying to get people to take their drugs right, use less expensive drugs. And frankly, it wasn't working. We were using education, we were using incentives, and nothing much was happening. We come to Atlanta. My wife used to work at the Centers for Disease Control. We're visiting a bunch of her friends. We go out for dinner. It's clear early in the evening that we're going to split the bill. I don't remember anything else about this dinner except this one person who ate more than anybody else, who drank more than anybody else. And I was livid, right? Because he was mooching off of everybody else. So I got really, I was just really, we were driving back to the hotel and the knuckles on my hands are turning white in the forehead. My vein is pulsating my forehead. And my wife reaches over and taps me on the shoulder. And she says, "It's Jack, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, Jack's awful. He's terrible." And everybody knows Jack, right? And so I started to think about it. And what I learned, after sort of pondering it for a while, was that Jack was the only one that was. So my wife reaches over and taps me on the shoulder, and she says, "It's Jack, isn't it?" And I said, "Of course it's Jack. I mean, the guy was behaving so badly." And I was upset that night and even to the next morning, which is not normal for me. And I started to think about it. And what I realized was that Jack was the only one behaving according to the principles that I learned as a rational economist, right? A classical economist. He was doing what was in his own self-interest. He was running the numbers. And if you think about it, let's say he got $30 more worth of stuff. There are 10 people in the party. He pays $3, gets $30. That's a tenfold ROI and a payback period of 2.5 hours. If you're the CFO, this is fantastic performance. And then it hit me. I mean, the bottom fell out from under me. I had spent so many years trying to understand this business about decision making, and it didn't work. My gut overwhelmed my head. I didn't act like Jack. I was trained that way, but I didn't act like Jack. And most of us don't. And I realized that most of us don't run the numbers and we don't behave according to these principles. And that, of course, is well known now. It's very well known. But I became fascinated by the possibility of maybe instead of trying to convince people what to do, to change the to change the environment in which patients and customers and our loved ones and ourselves find ourselves so that our natural inclinations lead us to better behaviors. And that's when I started trying to apply these principles in healthcare. They work really well, and it turns out the strategies actually apply across all kinds of settings. So I'm thankful to Jack, even though he was a mooch. I probably owe him dinner. Switch. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. That's a great question because this behavioral science area is enjoying a bit of a resurgence, and it has been a pretty high interest for a while. So there are tons of books, and they're all great, and I love all of them. The gap that I saw in the literature was more about a practical how-to field guide that people could pick up, really accessible, fun to read, put down, and then pick back up again as a reference guide. I don't want people to get the ideas that they're reading some dry field manual. It's actually full of stories, and it's really, really accessible. But it is aimed at how to apply these things in practice. My job at Express Scripts, where I was the chief scientist, was not to uncover really interesting science. It was how to marshal tens of thousands of our employees to put these things into practice. So it was really geared, these strategies are really, really geared to practical everyday use. And that's really what I hope and I really believe the book does that's different than the books that came before it. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Um, you know, Yeah, I'll give a couple of them. So when I actually don't have much of a problem watching TV. I can, watch a little, turn it off, whatever. And when my wife, when we first got together, My wife said, I want you to get rid of all your TVs. And I said, I really don't have a problem with TV. You know, I watch a little while I'm working out, but, you know, and she said, it's not for you. It's for me. She said, if there's a TV around, I will watch it for, you know, I watch junk. So she wanted the TVs removed from the house, not for me, but because of her. If there's TV around, she'll watch it for hours and watch junk TV. So we removed the TVs, and of course, she doesn't watch junk TV. That's another example of pre-commitment, making a decision today that makes it difficult or impossible to do the wrong thing in the future. And we had that sort of set up for a long time. We finally introduced a TV into the house, but it was in the basement, which is unfinished, right in front of a treadmill. The only way you can watch the TV is to literally stand on the treadmill. And at that point, it's pretty easy to turn the treadmill on. That's another strategy. It's called piggybacking, where you attach a desired behavior with another behavior that's really fun and easy. So we actually do use them all the time. We're a little bit obsessed with the idea of this stuff, but it actually does work. And you know, I would encourage your viewers to check out the strategies and give them a whirl. Yeah, I actually think that this isn't a set of new strategies, right? These are all strategies that we see all the time. So what you do when you turn on that light, that's called getting in the flow of your 50 bits. If something can't grab you and say, do you want to turn the dishwasher on or do you want to turn it off? Which is a difficult process to create in your home. Instead of grabbing the 50 bits and saying, look over here, you go to where the 50 bits are likely to be. And for you, that's the hood light over the oven. You're not going to go to sleep with that light on. That gets in your visual flow. The power of the book is not a set of, you know, bizarre, interesting, alien, you know, civilization strategies. They're strategies that have worked for people for tens or maybe even hundreds of years across all kinds of settings. The problem is that we don't realize that our bad behaviors are not due to bad intentions, but they're due to good intentions. That's the key message. If you start looking at the world through these new lenses, that bad behaviors are not the result of misplaced intentions, but instead good intentions that aren't acted upon, you're reminded of the 7 strategies to activate the good intentions. And I'll tell you, it's a very positive way of looking at life. If you're a behavior change professional, a marketer, let's say, and you're going to work every day with the implicit idea that your customers are not smart enough and so we've got to give them education, or they don't have enough skin in the game so we have to change the pricing or the incentives, or that they're of weak moral character, that is a tough day, and you got to do it day after day. You start to think of your customers as inferior, and it turns out that's not the case at all. Most people are reasonable and well-intentioned, and the problem that they have is a gap between intention and behavior, and that arises because of the way our brains are wired. It's a much more positive view of the world. And I'm a positive guy, but not Pollyannish. After going through this, you know, I have a much more positive view of the people around me. It's a great way to go through the day, for sure. Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm with you. I'm a little schizophrenic. I'm dressed for running from the waist down. You just can't see it. I'm with you. The little stuff matters, you know, and little changes over a long period of time, you end up in a totally different place. Yeah. 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 Yep. Yeah, when you say influence, it's interesting. When you say influence, what I think about is changing their underlying intentions, which could be a little bit manipulative, maybe not manipulative, but either way, the assumption in that statement is that the intentions are misplaced. And we now, I think it's pretty clear that's usually not the problem. So I'm not really interested in influencing. The great thing about this, and this was driven by the fact that I worked at this healthcare company, Express Scripts, was that the clients, our clients, which are the payers, the providers of the benefit, they really didn't want to force things down members' throats. The idea was, look, the patients actually do want to take their medications as prescribed. They really don't want to waste money. So they're very interested in that. Turns out to actually be true. So the strategies, if you apply them, are not manipulative. I mean, I suppose you could use them that way, and there's a chapter in the book that explains about some safeguards. But really what you're trying to do is trust that the patients and your customers and your coworkers have the right intentions, and then to reveal those intentions by activating them. Yeah, right. Not top of mind, and the top of our minds is really narrow, right? So that's the key idea. And it is a more positive view of people. It does assume that most people want to do the right thing, and therefore you're not trying to strong arm anybody. You're just trying to float their intentions up, and most of the time, like the vast majority of the time, those intentions are actually good. So you're not trying to change somebody. You're trying to make sure that the internal desires actually get acted on it externally. Yeah. Yeah. There's no question about it that we're responsible for our behaviors. I mean, I think that even people who feel, as though there's all this stuff is predetermined, we act in our relationships as though we're responsible for our behavior. I was upset with Jack, right? Because implicit in that is Jack's responsible for his behavior. So I'm not saying that people are not responsible for their behaviors at all. I'm saying that if you look at the evidence, the fundamental problem is not one of intention. It's one of whether intentions get activated. So I'm not trying to let people off the hook, and there are definitely people with bad intentions, but most of us actually do have pretty good intentions, and we're just struggling to get them to come out. And it's really because of the way our brains were built. Our brains were built for a place far away and long ago. The environment's changed quite a bit. Some of our instinctual behaviors are absolutely perfect today, and others, not so adaptive. And so we need to think about re-engineering the environment so things work better for us. Thank you. I really appreciate the enthusiasm and the interest. It was great talking with you. Okay. Have a great day. Bye.